I want to begin this lesson by reading from the 5th chapter of Matthew, the 13th through the 16th verses. You are the salt of the earth. But if the salt has lost its savor, how can its saltness be restored? It is no longer good for anything except to be trodden under foot and thrown out. You are the light of the world. A city built on a hill cannot be hid. No one, after lighting a lamp, puts it under a bushel basket, but sets it upon a lampstand, and it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light so shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven. The title of my topic today is As a Man Thinks, but I want to assure you ladies that when I use the word man, I'm speaking as species man, which includes all of us. And maybe you'll forgive me for using the masculine gender. But in this wonderful passage of the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus is addressing all of us who have awakened to an understanding of what material bondage is, and to have acquired some understanding of the nature of being. He is also addressing those of us who understand the meaning of the allness of God and the powerlessness of evil in the face of the truth that you and I already know. Jesus describes these people as being the salt of the earth and the light of the world. Certainly this is not too much praise, because when we understand the truth and when we really live the truth that corresponds to the truth that we know, we are changed and transformed into the beauty and presence of God that we were intended to exhibit. It is, however, possible, and in fact it's very easy, for us to accept the vital truths of God, to love their beauty, and yet to not put them consistently into our daily living day by day. When this case occurs, then the salt has lost its savor and is good for nothing but to be thrown out and be trodden underfoot. Certainly, if we understand and accept the teachings of Jesus Christ, if you and I make every effort to practice them in every department of our daily living, if we seek systematically to destroy everything in us that's unlike the nature of God, such as selfishness, vanity, jealousy, fear, condemnation, criticize, and everything else. If we will not feed or nourish or give in to these ideas of negativity, and if we will starve them to death by not expressing any of them in our daily lives, if we will extend to every person that we meet right thought, especially to the people or things that we dislike the most, then we are worthy to be called the salt of the earth and the light of the world. If you and I truly live this life, then it does not in the least matter what our present circumstances may be or what difficulties we have to try to overcome, because we will triumph over all of them. You and I will be in a very positive and illuminating influence to everyone around us, and we will be a blessing to the whole of humankind. And isn't that what we would like to do? So the question is really this: Are we really seeking God, or are we seeking the things from God? The very moment we are looking for the things of God, we are looking amiss. Until we have God, we have absolutely nothing. When we have God, we have all that is necessary for us. One person has said this: if we have God and everything else in the world, we would have no more than if we had God alone. Think about that. There is no such thing as God and something else. In attaining God, we attain all that God is. And that is God appearing as all forms in our human existence. Let us not seek the forms of God, such as supply or health, but let us first seek the allness of God. And in seeking the allness of God, all of these things shall be added unto us. You know, Jesus, in the Sermon on the Mount in chapter 6 of Matthew, the 33rd verse, Jesus said this: but seek first the kingdom of God. First the kingdom. Seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all of these things will be added unto you. This is a principle of life. This is what life works. To use righteousness means to use right useness of the powers that are already within us, the God powers, to use them rightly. The person, you and me, who is studying and practicing the presence of God, we will have no problems, no needs, no desires if we are truly putting God in our life through the teachings of Jesus Christ. These things which are necessary for us, such as health and supply and all the rest, have a way of taking care of themselves. Remember that the state of our soul is always expressed in our outer circumstances and events that come into our lives, and in the intangible influence which we radiate from ourselves. We have an energy that we radiate based on what we are thinking, based on what is in our consciousness. The thoughts produce an energy and people can feel it. I think it was Emerson that said, what you are is so loud that I cannot hear what you are saying. What we are, we demonstrate through this energy that is in us. And this is the God energy, and we might use it wrongly or we might use it rightly. But what we want is to use it rightly. Through Adam, the mind of man accepted a belief in God and evil. And from that moment on, instead of being a pure instrument of God, our mind began forming itself into material forms of both good and evil, just as if it were a cookie cutter. And you know, our mind is like a cookie cutter, because when you put the cookie cutter in the dough, what do you get? You get the exact shape of what the cookie cutter is. And our minds work exactly the same way. The product of our minds appear in the same form as the thoughts and beliefs that we now hold in our minds. Think about that. Think how important it is for us to begin to think thoughts of God rather than all of the forms and things that we normally would think about. If there is evil in the mind, we will see evil out in our experience. But by the same token, if we will think good thoughts, we will begin to produce good out into our experience. And you know what? We get to choose. We get to choose how we want to think. and it's important. The mind produces its own image and likeness, and if we stand behind the mind and put in all of the fear and superstition and ignorance that we do, that comes out of a belief in two powers, then we will be able to produce or demonstrate that which is in our mind and which we believe and feel. And it doesn't take much to demonstrate. There's that beautiful story about this lady that had this big home, lived in it alone except for a housekeeper. And the lady of the house was going to go to Europe for about 3 months. And the housekeeper she had was quite negative. She was always feeling ill, feeling sick, complained about everything, the world was wrong, and you know that type of person. Perhaps we have been that ourselves at one time. But anyway, the lady of the house made her sit down, and she said, "Now look, I know that you've been kind of negative lately, and things have not been going right, you haven't been feeling well, but I've written out this long affirmation. And I want your solemn promise that you will say that every day while I'm gone, and see what happens." Well, it was a real lengthy one, and she had written it out on this paper, and so she finally got the solemn promise of the housekeeper that, yes, I will do that. So she went away for 3 months and came back and walked in the house, and here's this radiant being. She just is beautiful, loves life, loves everything about life. She's feeling great, terrific. And so rather smugly, the lady of the house says, "Well, I guess that's because of the affirmation I gave you." And the housekeeper kind of lowered her head and said, "Well, not exactly." She said, "I kind of lost the paper that you gave me, and I couldn't remember what it said." So she said, "Every morning I got up and I looked in the mirror and I said, 'Oh, hell, I'm well.'" It doesn't take much. You see, the good thoughts will produce good experiences in our life. Healing thoughts will bring healing to the body. We have many people in this congregation that through prayer and through affirmations of the productive kind have been healed from everything from cancer to heart conditions. And what I'm telling you is that your thoughts will make a difference. Jesus put it this way, "As you sow, so shall you reap." The mind that is filled with material beliefs, theories, opinions, doctrines, and creeds can only manifest its own state of chaos. But the mind freed of these beliefs will become the instrument through which the creative principle of God can be demonstrated in our life. Don't we all want to have a terrific life and feel good? Well, I'm giving you some of the ideas that you can put into your daily living, and you can create your own life of love and peace. Is it possible? Absolutely. It certainly is. All external appearances in our experience are always formed by our mind. Let me repeat that. It's very important. All external appearances that come into our experience are all formed through our mind. As we sow mentally, so shall we reap materially. We have 2 booklets in our bookstore. One is called "As a Man Thinketh," and the other "As a Woman Thinketh." And in the front is a beautiful poem which I wish every one of you could get and memorize. It goes like this: "Mind is the master power that molds and makes. And man is mind, and evermore he takes the tool of thought, and shaping what he wills, brings forth 1,000 joys, 1,000 ills. He thinks in secret, and it comes to pass that environment out here is but his looking glass." Very important principle. I want you to think about a man who is extremely poor, wretchedly poor. He is extremely anxious that his surroundings and his home life should improve. But he unfortunately shirks his work, and he feels justified in deceiving his employer because of the insufficiency of his pay. Such a person does not understand the simplest rudiments of these Jesus Christ principles, which are the basis of true prosperity for us all. Such a person is not only unfit to rise out of his wretchedness, but he is also attracting to himself still more wretchedness by dwelling in and acting out indolent, deceptive, and unmanly thoughts. There's another man to think about, a rich man. He has all the money in the world, yet he has this terrible disease and pain through his own gluttony. Oh, he is willing to give all kinds of money to get rid of the pain and the disease, but he will not give up his gluttony. Such a man is totally unfit to rise out of his pain and disease because he is still pulling in all of the wrong thoughts. And he's cursing his disease, and he's cursing his body. And so he is totally unfit to rise out of his wretchedness of pain and into the light, the sunlight of health. He wants to gratify his taste for rich and unnatural foods, but also have his health as well. And there's no way that he can do that as long as he keeps not understanding the principle of life, which is thoughts held in mind produce after their kind. A basic unity principle. Thoughts held in mind produce after their kind. I have introduced these two cases simply to illustrate the truth that species man is the causer, although mostly unconsciously, he is the causer of his circumstances, and that while wanting a good end to his problems, he is by his own thought processes continually frustrating its accomplishment by encouraging thoughts and desires which cannot possibly harmonize with the intended result that he wants to have. True Christianity, such as taught by Jesus Christ, is the entirely positive influence. It comes into our lives to encourage us, to enrich us, to make our lives fuller and wider and better. It's never there to restrict us. You cannot lose anything worthwhile by acquiring a knowledge of truth. Many people have the idea of getting a better knowledge of God will mean that I have to give up something that I'll regret losing. One lady put it this way. She said, well, I mean to take up religion later on when I'm older, but right now I want to have more fun. Anyone been there? That's where I was when I was growing up. Very common. The only things that we have to give up are selfishness, fear, lack, limitation, hate, and so on. Above all, one has to sacrifice his belief that there is more than one power. There is only one power, one presence, God the good omnipotent, present and active in our lives and in all of our affairs. As you and I grow into the true spiritual power and understanding, we will actually find that many of the outer rules and regulations we will no longer need. But this is because we have really risen above to a higher level of being within that's already present within us, and we're starting to live from that higher level. Let's look at a man who has reached this higher level. And he is at a point in his spiritual understanding that he can make all of his appointments. He can go through all of his day's work totally on time, but yet he never carries a watch, nor does he ever bother to look at a clock. Now, there are people like that can do that. But like the rest of us, I suppose, we see somebody like that and say, gee, I want to do that. And so immediately we go about our business and we forget to take a watch and we totally ignore the clock. And what happens is that we're late for all of our appointments. We mess up our schedules and everybody else's schedule that we try to come in contact with. You see, at this point, we are totally unfit to ignore time because we haven't developed it properly in our mind first. And that's true about everything in life. We have to prepare here. Within your mind, you have to build within your mind the beautiful ideas and be able to see them and live them. Living the truth of God is usually the last thing that we ever do. We love the truth, we love to study it, we love to know it, but it's tough to live it. There's a beautiful part in the book of Revelation which talks about a person was given this piece of paper and he said, eat it. And what it said it was sweet in the mouth, but it was bitter in the belly. And that means that's just like truth. It's sweet in the mouth. It's sweet when we hear it. But it becomes bitter sometimes when we have to live it. And we have to love everybody. Sometimes that's painful. Can't do it. It's sweet in the mouth, but bitter in the belly when we try to put it into practice. Yet that is the thing that we have to do. When the student is spiritually ready, but only then we can dispense with the time, with the watch, and we can carry on our duties and appointments on time, always. But when we are spiritually ready. The principle here I'm trying to teach is this: the spiritual coming of age cannot be hurried or forced, but must appear in its own good time when our consciousness is ready. Same thing for healing wounds, for healing physical, healing the mental. The same is true. Jesus came to carry the human race forward to the next great step, which indeed can be the first step in overcoming all of our limitations. We must learn and understand clearly what the step implies, and this we must be willing to take. The step I am talking about is we must learn that outer conformity, as necessary as it is in this life, is no longer sufficient by itself. But now we must, if we are to mature spiritually, we must change our inner self. We must change our consciousness, our thoughts and feelings. We must learn to demonstrate more of the divine ideas of God. I mentioned one throughout this talk, is the love of God. Unconditional love is one of the great powers that we have. Spiritual demonstration demands that anger itself be removed. It is simply not possible to get any experience of God that's worthwhile while we're still harboring anger, resentment in our minds. That's a thought. And thoughts held in mind produce after their kind. We're the only ones that get hurt. And yet we continue to do that. Of course, we're human and we have to deal with anger. And so what I should be saying is don't keep the anger. Get rid of it as soon as you can. One can bring a fire under control when it first starts. But when it gets a-blazing, it gets out of control, and it's very hard to manage. So it is with anger and resentment. The time to stop it is when we first notice it. So the great message I can give you this morning is this. You and I already have the power within us to make any and all changes that we want to make. It's up to you. It's not up to me. It's not up to God. You have the choice to make any kind of change that you want, and you can do it because you have the spiritual power to do it. We are learning more and more how to use these powers that God has. But the mind is so important. I want to tell you a story about, it came out of the Middle Ages. It seemed that a citizen of this country was thrown into prison by a baron. And he was taken down these long, dark steps by a jailer, a ferocious jailer that had a key about a foot long. He was thrown into a dungeon, and the door was slammed shut. And there he was. Every morning for 20 years, the jailer came by, opened the creaking door, put in a loaf of bread and some water, and shut the clanging door. And there he was. But after 20 years, the citizen said, I've had enough of this, I want to die. But I don't want to commit suicide. So he thought, and he said, well, when the jailer comes in the morning, I'll pick a fight with him. And then in the ensuing fight, he will kill me, and my problems will be all over. So he went around the room testing everything, and he came to the door, and he just put his hand up to it, and it started to swing open. And he looked at it, and he inspected it, and he found out that there wasn't a lock. He also found out there never was a lock on the door. He could have left that dungeon any time that he wished. He was a captive, but not of stone or iron. He was a captive of his own false belief. He was not locked in. He thought he was. We are all living in some kind of a prison. Some in a prison of lack, some in a prison of remorse and resentment, some in a prison of fear, some in a prison of sickness, but always in the prison created by our mind. There is no truth in our seeming troubles, no reality in lack. There is no power in time or conditions that keep us and making us getting old, tired, and sick. Our unity teaching instructs us and says, you are not locked in a prison of circumstances. You are not chained in any dungeon. In the name of God, turn the handle and walk out into the freedom of God's world. Build a mental equivalent up here of freedom, vibrant physical energy, health, prosperity, and all the rest, because all of that is God. Build it by thinking of it, having faith in it, and then living it. Living it. And all of the old limitations will gradually fade out, for the door is unlocked, and the voice of God in your heart says, be free. I want to close this lesson with a poem that came out of Think and Grow Rich, the book by Napoleon Hill. Probably most of you are familiar with it. But it kind of puts a cap on everything that we've been saying. It goes like this. If you think you are beaten, you are. If you think you dare not, you don't. If you like to win but you think you can't, it's almost certain you won't. If you think you lose, you're lost. For out of the world we find success begins with a fellow's will. It's all in the state of mind. If you think you're outclassed, you are. You've got to think high to rise. You've got to be sure of yourself before you can ever win that prize. Life's battles don't always go to the stronger or faster man. But sooner or late, the one who wins is the one who thinks he can. Have a wonderful time readjusting your own mental processes and get them into alignment with the divine ideas of God. God bless you, and thank you so much. This is, of course, our time of sharing together. It's one of the great and wonderful opportunities that we have in order to give of ourselves, our time, our talent, our treasure. And this is a beautiful time in which we can share that which God has allowed to flow through us, and which we have by our own mental processes brought forth. So let's use our mental process, and whatever it is that we choose to give this morning, let us be glad about it. And let us give until it feels real good. And so in that consciousness, let us affirm together our prayer, our offertory prayer. Divine love through me blesses and multiplies all that I have, all that I give, and all that I receive. Thank you, Father, Mother, God.
Some birds live in cages, they sing a quiet song, and like them I could sing for only you. But Lord, your love released me to sing a different song and soar above the captive life I knew. Spirit wings, you lift me over all the earth-bound things, and like a bird my heart is flying free. I'm soaring on the song your spirit brings. O Lord of all, you let me see a vision of your majesty. You lift me up, you carry me on your spirit wings. Now when my life confines me, I just look to you, and soon my heart is soaring high above. Troubles look much smaller from your point of view, lifted up on spirit wings of love. Spirit wings, you lift me over all the earth-bound things, and like a bird my heart is flying free. I'm soaring on the song your spirit brings, O Lord of all. majesty.